The philosophy of language and theoretical linguistics delve into the nature of language, aiming to answer fundamental queries such as what is language and what is the origin of language, as well as why do languages have the properties they do. Beyond answering these primary questions, these academic disciplines also explore how language is learned and employed by individuals and societies. They scrutinize the cognitive, neural, social, and cultural elements that influence language use. While a lot of linguistic research can be prescriptive or descriptive, there's an inherent assumption that a researcher's understanding of language is expressed through their methodology and choice of terminology. This is often influenced by the theoretical framework they favor and their perspective on linguistic phenomena. For example, within the generative grammar framework, emphasis might be on underlying syntactic structures, whereas cognitive linguists might focus more on the role of conceptual metaphor. Linguists vary in their philosophical schools of thought, the most prominent dichotomy being the nature-nurture debate. Some focus intently on a single language theory, while others spread their attention across multiple views. As it is customary in human and social sciences, linguistic theories are split into humanistic and sociobiological methodologies. Terms like rationalism, functionalism, formalism, and constructionism can vary in meaning depending on their context. Humanistic theories frame language as a sociocultural construct, primarily emphasizing culture, nurture, creativity, and diversity. A typical rationalist approach, rooting from the Age of Enlightenment, posits that language was methodically developed by humans to facilitate communication. This view regards language as a rational human innovation. Ever since the times of Plato and Aristotle, many philosophers of language have seen it as a man-made tool for expressing statements or propositions about the world using a predicate-argument structure. Aristotle's example: man is a rational animal, wherein the subject man is attributed by the predicate, is a prime example. In the 20th century, Edmund Husserl echoed the arguments of 17th century rational grammar, championing pure logical grammar. He suggested that the structures of consciousness are compositional and organized into subject-predicate structures. This manifests itself cross-linguistically in the structures of semantics and syntax. Categorical grammar is another manifestation of logical grammar in contemporary linguistics. In the 19th century, before the separation of sociology and psychology, linguistic shifts were considered an outcome of collective psychological dynamics within a society, as argued by liberal scholars like Moritz Lazarus, Hyman Steinthal, and Wilhelm Wundt. Advocates of the Volker psychology, folk psychology, attributed language to the spirit of the nation or Volksgeist. According to Wundt, social development and education shape the human mind based on syllogistic reasoning principles. He argued in favor of a binary branching model to represent the mind in syntax structure. This concept traveled to North America through linguists Franz Boas and Leonard Bloomfield, ultimately leading to the development of American structuralism. Following World War I, Bloomfield replaced Wundt's structural psychology with Albert Paul Weiss's behavioral psychology. However, Wundt's principles remained central to Bloomfield's linguistic analysis. Later, the Noam Chomsky's sociobiological approach paved the way for the emergence of generative grammars. As the fame of the generative grammar declined by the end of the 20th century, cultural anthropological explorations triggered fresh debates pertaining to the language-culture relationship, featuring scholars like Daniel Everett, Jesse Prinz, Nicholas Evans, and Stephen Levinson. Meanwhile, in Europe, Emile Durkheim distinguished psychology from sociology, laying the foundation for autonomous scientific studies. Similarly, Ferdinand de Saussure advocated the independence of linguistics from psychology, introducing a semiotic theory that furthered structuralism, functionalism, positionalism, post-structuralism, and more. The terms structuralism and functionalism emerged from Durkheim's alterations of Herbert Spencer's organicism, which draws comparisons between social structures and bodily organs, both essential for their functions. He viewed language from two perspectives. First, inspired by Steinthal and Durkheim, he perceived language as a social reality. Second, Saussure reasoned language to be an interconnected system of concepts and expressions, whereby language becomes a twin system constituting conceptual and linguistic forms. According to him, both are mutually reliant, since expressions are purposeless without meanings and organized meanings are futile without expressions. For Saussure, the inception of language rests not on the physical world, but rather on the differences existing within concepts and linguistic forms. Louis Hjelmslev, a structural and formal linguist, asserted that linguistics is a mathematically systematic discipline, fully excluding any psychological or sociological dimensions. His perspective, often termed formalism, approached linguistics as a comparative study of the grammatical structures of all languages, semantics and discourse structures included. Along similar lines, linguist Lucien Tesnier, despite being regarded as a structuralist, posited that meaning inspired expression rather than the other way around, at least when it came to the semantics. Syntax relationship, he viewed semantics as psychological and syntax as a requirement for it, translating two-dimensional semantic representation into a linear format. This theoretical framework of language as an interplay between the conceptual and the expressive systems, originally set forth by Ferdinand de Saussure, was further developed in various human sciences sectors, such as philosophy and anthropology by such figures as Claude Lévi-Strauss, Michael Foucault, and Jacques Derrida, among many others. These thinkers were drawn to Émile Durkheim's conception of language as a social fact, or a code of behavior governed by rules, but eventually rejected the structuralist notion that norms were impervious to change by the individual. Post-structuralists explore how language shapes our understanding of reality and, consequently, society itself. Furthermore, the humanistic tradition stemming from 19th-century Volcker psychology underscores the unconscious underpinnings of the social construction of language. Some viewpoints from post-structuralism and social constructionism, however, treat human languages as human, made, not natural. At this extreme, structural linguist Eugenio Caseria stressed the deliberate crafting of language. Daniel Everett has also investigated the question of language construction through the lens of intentionality and free will. Contrarily, sociobiological approaches view language as a biological phenomenon. Perspectives on language as part of cultural evolution generally fall into two categories: genetic determinism, positing that languages arise from the human genome, and social Darwinism, applying principles and methods of evolutionary biology to linguistic similes like that of Chomsky. Generative grammar assert that language is a result of a random genetic mutation, focusing on studying a universal grammar. Others, like Ray Jackendoff, suggest that our innate language ability could be the product of evolutionary adaptations. This latter view is also supported by Steven Pinker, who posits that humans are born with a language instinct due to these adaptations. Generative grammarians of the past have speculated that genes could indirectly influence abstract linguistic features. This viewpoint is associated with functionalism, a theory that proposes a less definitive link between genetics and language structure. Functionalism suggests that humans' physical and neurological makeup might influence language development in a more overarching way. Exploring these ideas further, John A. Hawkins proposed that due to the brain's role as a syntactic parser, certain word orders might be easier to process, leading to their common usage. This hypothesis, however, requires further testing and confirmation from psycholinguistic studies. George Lakoff, a proponent of conceptual metaphor theory in cognitive linguistics, posited that the use of visual metaphors in language occurs due to the inherited ability for deductive reasoning based on visual thinking from our animal ancestors. The early field of evolutionary biology perceived that the same principles and methods could be applied to study both languages and species. Controversy arose with the implication of languages competing for survival, mirroring Darwinian theories, given its perceived contributions to social Darwinism and the two world wars. Theorems by Schleicher and Muller, backed by Darwin, equated languages to either organisms or populations. Richard Dawkins presented a modern interpretation of these ideas in 1976 through memetics, comparing and likening words and ideas to viruses or replicators despite its intent as a less harsh alternative to genetic determinism. Memetics has largely been dismissed as pseudoscience, failing to gain scientific recognition. Despite this, the analogy between language and species remains prevalent in linguistics and other social sciences, inspiring numerous efforts to reintroduce it in various forms since the 1990s. As noted by Jamin Pelkey, theorists seeking to correlate language with a specific aspect of biological growth often differ in their views. Whereas William James aligns language development with zoological evolution, William Croft favors comparison to botanical evolution. Other linguists focus on a micro level, equating linguistic phenomena to cellular or genetic processes. Some even propose that language behaves like a virus or a parasite. These various approaches to linguistics, diverse as they are, all fall under the umbrella of functionalism. This category encompasses the theories of language as a complex adaptive system, usage-based linguistics, construction grammar, emergent linguistics, and more.